How might your life have been different if there was a religion for you? A religion that honored you as a woman, as made equal in the image of God. Welcome to Heretica, her eco-feminist theology podcast. My name is Elena and I am an eco-feminist theologian. Please subscribe at theologyofher.substack.com. Hello and welcome to my new episode podcast where I will be sharing my master thesis in feminist theology, where I explored First Blood, Menarche as the foundation for women's self-realisation. The project was 7 chapters long and I'll be dropping 1 chapter at a time, beginning with the introduction. In this work, I look at the role of coming-of-age rites of passage within the context of parthenogenesis and answer the question, how is menarche understood in Greek cults and early religions as a foundation for divine vision? A review of the archaeological and existing scholarly literature reveals that beginning in prehistoric cultures, before any written records, human society had a goddess-worshipping religious basis. Chronologically, this is the period beginning in Neolithic and continuing through to the end of the Bronze Age, which was predominantly matriarchal. Evidence of a goddess-worshipping religious basis continued in the early historic period of mainland Greece, evident by the female priesthoods. Archaeological findings in almost all primitive cultures of the world uncovered small female figures, the so-called Venus of Willendorf statuettes, which appear for the first time in the prehistoric sites of the Upper Paleolithic period and begin to provide the basis for the goddess-worshipping society, as pioneered by Lithuanian-American archaeologist Maria Gimbutas. The goddess was honored in cosmogony stories and ritual practices as the original primordial creator of the universe, who alone, parthenogenetically, without the direct biological participation or mention of a male, created the universe, and a sexual form of reproduction which is not material, but an esoteric evolution which culminates oneself into a spiritual rebirth and into eternal life. Consequently, this theurgic or magical religious path of parthenogenesis, from the Greek parthenos, meaning virgin, and genesis, from the beginning, also known as the cult of divine birth, as defined by scholar Marguerite Mary Rigoglioso, gave women's fertility its metaphysical substratum. Terracotta figurines of females with heavy breasts and side hips, often with a red wash, are among the primary artifacts, and later phallic symbols were uniformly found, which prove that sexual symbolism has been an inherent aspect of nature worship since time immemorial. It's commonly held that a full figure and the red color are signs of fertility rites. Within this parthenogenetic context, they ritualize coming-of-age rites of passage to connect young girls to the cosmic mother, the source of universal creation, through mimicking the parthenogenetic essence of the goddesses in her virgin wholeness. The intention was to guide women to self-realization, which was made possible through Theology, the Neoplatonist term used in the Chaldean oracles, also known as divine working. This involved the practice of rituals, oftentimes seen as magical in nature, and whose purpose was to invoke the presence of a deity to achieve enosis, or union with God and perfection. The first coming-of-age ritual which I mentioned in the thesis is the pre-pubescent ritual called Arctia, in honor of the virgin goddess Artemis of Proron, where girls up to the age of 10 celebrated their wild nature by playing the she-bear. When I speak of self-realization, I am referring to an understanding of the self, also in Neoplatonic terms, a strand of Platonic philosophy that emerged in the 3rd century AD as a form of contemplative practice or ascesis that involves the emotions, mind, body, and psyche or soul, all becoming absorbed, concentrated, controlled, and integrated around the practice of inward self-contemplation. The aim was for the self to eventually assimilate and become one with the object of self-contemplation, by way of retracing the monistic divine through the layers of being. In this case, a chosen virgin deity, considered to be the one divine creator of the universe. Neoplatonist philosopher Porphyry defines a very precise, contemplative psychology as a gradual process of inner transformation, of identifying, purifying, and concentrating the faculty of awareness to cultivate wisdom and self-knowledge. Notions of divinity in this instance are both immanent. They reside within one's own self and transcendent through the concept of the Virgin Goddess as the one cosmic creator of the universe. In speaking of divine vision in Neoplatonism, it is considered that self-awakening leads to a divine vision and is considered a state of consciousness between wake and sleep, where one can see as light, an anthropomorphic vision of the divine, as a result of ongoing self-contemplative efforts that expand and transform one's consciousness. The founder of Neoplatonism, Plotinus, says of this turning within oneself and seeing the vision as one with the self and as oneself. Lastly, Neoplatonism considers intuitive knowing to rely on and refer to nous, a divine mind or intellect as emanating from the One. This is a principle of intuitive knowing that is characterized by self-reflection and is a source of self-knowledge, including metaphysical philosophical truths or noesis, an ability to see the truth and have sacred communication with a deity, leading to a union between the human divine nature. A vision of the divine being is considered to happen at the level of nous. From 1150 to 750 BC and onwards, Greece emerged as a patriarchal religious culture, with the establishment from Hesiod in his poem Theogony in the 8th or 7th century BC of Zeus as god and his marriage to Hera, symbolizing the fusion of Indo-European culture of the Greeks with the Aegean culture of the pre-Greek inhabitants of the mainland. Female priesthoods begin to gain a subordinate role to that of male priesthoods as they started to dominate. With the advent of Christianity, female priesthood offices were completely banned during the persecution of pagans in the late Roman Empire, specifically by Emperor Theodosius I in 393 AD, which stipulated that under the Christian principles, women were not to hold any priestly office. Confusingly, cosmogony stories also began to change, exposing male creator gods who, without a womb, were able to give birth to the universe, creating the heavens and the earth spontaneously. In Greek mythology, Zeus swallowed Metis, who was pregnant at the time, and then through his cranium it is said he birthed Athena. As Marguerite Ricoglioso has noted, in short, we have been programmed with stories of male parthenogenesis that defy or contradict the very processes of birth that are woven into the fabric of the universe as we understand it on an essential level. The resulting cognitive dissonance has, I would argue, created a gross confusion within our psyches. Deep down, we sense that something is wrong from the start. Adding to this existential confusion has been Christianity's purity story of the Virgin Mary, becoming pregnant to a material Jesus without intercourse, and Mary Magdalene being a prostitute, creating the virgin whore complex. Further, the doctrine of Eve's fall in Genesis 3, tempted by the serpent, deemed our blood cycles as a curse from God. In this project, I reinterpreted these events as spiritual parthenogenetic acts that lead women to liberation, both from patriarchal thought and mortal life. To do this, the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary will play a central role and will be explored as potentially being Mary's menarche, and will thus act as the second rite of passage that will be mentioned in the thesis, while also compared to the first rite of passage, that of Artemis of Broron. Thanks to the second and third wave feminism, which flourished in the 1960s and early 1990s respectively, and brought about the creation of feminist studies, feminist theologians began to reject religions of male-female difference as irredeemably sexist. Instead, they turned to explicitly holistic and feminized traditions and expressions of spiritualities of life, and several of them retraced the steps of their female ancestors back into prehistory and early history and focused upon worship of the goddess. The aim was to redeem the significance of goddess worship in the pursuit of their struggle for self-actualization and self-realization. Consequently, women in modern times have begun reclaiming and recreating coming-of-age rites of passage, whereby fertility was realized as self-generating, inviolable, and sovereign creative power. When we understand that the Virgin Goddess was the original primordial creator of the universe, and that she created it from original primordial feminine energy and primordial masculine energy, being equally a part of it, we can begin to unearth and heal a crucial piece of feminine psychology that has been buried and is a critical component of the root cause of existential crisis. If we can establish that it is upon the first bleed that the journey of cosmic creation essentially begins, we can spiritualize our bodies as a sacred embodiment of divine creation and not as a curse. From there, we can begin regaining our existential health, which is intimately interconnected with ecofeminism, and the realization that human, non-human life and our search for liberation as self-realization are all cosmologically interdependent and as much earth-based as it is transcendental. Importantly, the literature considering both these coming-of-age rituals. Vital to this project from an existential perspective is Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, an introduction to logotherapy, which provides us with a context for meaning and its importance for human health. Also based on his own personal experience as a Holocaust survivor, from which he created his own meaning-making therapeutic protocol called logotherapy. Logos is a Greek word which denotes meaning. According to logotherapy, the striving to find meaning in one's life is the primary motivational force in man, in other words, a will to meaning. In keeping with Frankl, what's important in the quest for meaning is that it's unique to everyone, and only alone can we find, realize, and fulfill our will to meaning. This indicates that meaning in life is not a one-size-fits-all. So to answer my overarching question, how is menarche the foundation for divine vision? I will consider several preliminary questions, which I will answer chapter by chapter through this podcast. The first one is, how is menarche interpreted through the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary as the basis for rites of passage? The second is, how could menarche today be interpreted as the basis of a woman's journey towards self-realization and higher spiritual experiences? And the third is, what is the impact of menarche for women's existential health? To answer these questions, the research method that I use is the kaleidoscope feminist theological method. The kaleidoscope, which in Greek means beautiful form to see, as a feminist theology method to explore women's fragmented experiences. On the struggle to name women's experiences, there is no unified body of women's experience, but rather there are multiple forms and multiple dimensions of women's experience. Thus, as the kaleidoscope is made up of shards of shattered stained glass to form the whole mandala, and when rotated the light allows us to see the various forms, colors, and densities, which in interaction with the mirrors becomes a beautiful form to see. In the same way, when we reconstruct theology through a feminist center point, the result is the formation of a whole mandala, a universal image of oneness and wisdom, which restores woman to her full humanity and power. And also the theoretical position that I will be using and you'll be hearing about is ecofeminism, which I've shared about, but just to repeat, ecofeminism essentially uses the basic principles of feminism, being gender equality. The theoretical position I will be using is that of ecofeminism, which essentially uses the basic principles of feminism, being gender equality, a revaluing of matriarchal or non-linear structures, and a view of the world built upon holistic interconnections, organic actions, the qualities of intuitive knowing or intuitive inquiry, and cooperation to heal the split between nature and social cultural factors. Ecofeminism or ecological feminism examines the interconnectedness between the domination of women and the domination of nature, on both a cultural symbolic level and a socio-economic level, and seeks worldviews to liberate and heal these interconnected dominations by understanding their etiology and enforcement. The link between women and nature in the patriarchal dualistic culture of female-male, mind-body nature culture parallels women and nature as having little or no meaning independent to men. It has also organized itself in such a way that patriarchy dominates and distracts the earth and its living creatures for profit over people, natural resources, and life quality. When brought into the sphere of feminist theology, the social patterns developed reveal a system of domination of women rooted in a larger patriarchal hierarchical system of priestly and warrior king control, whereby ideological tools are constructed as a reflection to the will of the god or gods, and creation stories of the ancient Near East and classical Athens, culminating into Hebrew and Greek thought, and later reigning in Christianity, begin with the presupposition of patriarchal dualism as the foundational nature of all things. By conquering the old Earth Mother, the matriarchal social cultural reality created the cosmos alone out of her parthenogenetic nature. Ecofeminist theology challenges these patriarchal and dualistic mind constructs over the female body, which in Western theological thought creates existential distortion for women in terms of their relation to themselves and God, and consequently to Mother Earth and the cosmos as a whole. Therefore, to challenge the structures of patriarchal domination requires biophilic ecological insights within feminist theological thought, and to question the human nature and human-divine relationship in non-dualistic terms. Ecofeminism reminds us that we are here to live in life-giving harmony with the whole of the Earth community, and that our own self-reflective consciousness, grounded in our intuitive knowing, which is our journey through time and space, guides us to recollect through our primordial memory how once we lived in oneness, that is aware of our mortal and immortal nature, and as part of our interdependent upon ecological consciousness in what is known as matriarchal or goddess-worshipping cultures. In these egalitarian cultures, God, humans, and non-humans co-created, and this gave humans the ontic of a will to live. This will to live was rooted on an active social ethic and a sense of transcendent mysticism, called the ethical mysticism aspect of reverence of life. Devotion to suprapersonal entities, or in service to being, the human species can achieve self-perfection and assign deep, lasting, ultimate meaning to their life. The will to live is the basis for cosmological teleology in which each organism seeks to promote its existence and produce, through the evolution, the natural wonders of the biosphere. This inclusive way of living finds alignment with parthenogenesis, whereby the finite will to live experiences union with the universal will to life, or human divine nature, transcendent of duality, by process of devotion to the Virgin Goddess, or parthenogenetic being. Coupled with ecofeminism, this can serve as a valuable means to bridge the intellectual and the emotional, and usher in the modern environmental and feminist theological consciousness of sacred interconnectedness of all things. Balancing the tension between growth and sustainability will not be possible without women owning and asserting their autonomy and radical freedom, and by participating in a living justice, based not on the ways of men, but on the ways of Mother Nature. The myth of the parthenogenetic goddess thus symbolizes the regenerative process of nature as life-giving. The virgin goddess is the spirit of life, and her power is both biological and spiritual, and this power belongs to women alone. She embodies the magical and sacred power for growth, sustainability, and rebirth through her connection with the cycles of nature, in tune with the earth and the moon, and with the whole of creation, as a result of her fertile creative energies of reproduction, birth, and regeneration. In the context, therefore, of understanding oneself, feminist theology is reframing God as also the goddess, and the nature of creation through liberation theology as an embodied reality for women. This brings about the right balance between justice and sustainability, and a vision of divine presence that sustains the natural processes and creates communities that are mutually and equally flourishing. An ecofeminist approach to challenging patriarchal hierarchies and religious narratives unmasks the interconnections between all systems of oppression, rethinks what it means to be human, and sees the intersectional and diverse experiences of women and that of other oppressed groups, and seeks to bring them into equity. This highlights how ecofeminism confronts patriarchal oppression and leads to holistic transformation, restoring gender equality in theological work. How might your life have been different if there was a religion for you? A religion that affirmed you as a woman, as equal to man, and made in the image of God. How might your life have been different? Heretica, her ecofeminist theology educational podcast.